Good evening. Today is Monday, June the 1st, and this is the Cabarrus County Board of Education work session. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Board members, I'd like to call for a motion to approve the agenda. I have Mr. Harrison with the motion and Mr. Walter with the second. We did add one additional item to our agenda tonight, board members, and that was item 5.09. That is the request authorization to pursue funding from the BOC in July to add 6 classrooms to the new Odell Elementary School. So that is the addition to our agenda. That is on our board docs. All right, all in favor of the agenda as written, say aye. Aye. Oppose? All right, the agenda carries, and we'll be moving on to our report section. I will call Mr. John Basiliste forward, and he will give us a report on the McKinney-Vento annual review.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the board. It's my pleasure to speak to you tonight about the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. So as many of you know, the McKinney-Vento Act was the first legislation to deal with homelessness, and it was signed into law in 1987 by President Reagan in the 100th Congress. The McKinney-Vento Act supports homeless students' rights to remain at, get to, and succeed in school. The Act recognizes that school can be the source of stability for students whose lives may be chaotic or transient. Okay. The information I'm about to provide to you is from Barbara Duffield. She's the Policy Director for the National Association for the Education of Homeless Children and Youth. So I'm going to go over some national information with you for just a moment. So as you can see on the slide, it says it takes children an average of 4 to 6 months to recover academically after changing schools. We know that student mobility also hurts non-mobile students, and a study found average test scores for non-mobile students were significantly lower in high schools with high mobility rates. Also, students who switch schools frequently scored lower on standardized tests. The study found mobile students scored 20 points lower than non-mobile students. We also know that students suffer psychologically, socially, and academically from mobility, and while that might seem implicit, we know that mobile students are less likely to participate in extracurricular activities and more likely to act out or get into trouble. Also, mobility during high school greatly diminishes the likelihood of graduation. The study found that students who change high schools even once were less than half as likely as stable students to graduate, even when you control for other factors. So that really is the why behind McKinney-Vento. It's not just because it's necessarily seemingly a nice thing to do or a compassionate thing to do. It is. It really is. But at the same time, we know it has a direct impact on our students' success. So let's go over eligibility as to who is covered. If you'll give me just a moment. So who are we talking about? The federal definition for McKinney-Vento includes all students who lack fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. So let's look at these terms for a minute. Fixed means that it's an actual dwelling. It's not on wheels or a tent or something of that nature. Regular means that it's a place that the child stays consistently and reliably. So this would mean it's their own residence. They're not living off the good graces of another family, allowing them to be there for a short time, or a motel where they might be there one day and not the next. It means that they consistently will be there. And adequate means that there's sufficient space for the child. So this would include families that are doubled up due to evictions or foreclosures, or people staying in abandoned dwellings. So locally, about 72% of our identified homeless families are considered to be doubled up as a result of economic hardships caused by foreclosures, evictions, or natural disasters. These families are considered to not have adequate housing. So I want to make a distinction here for just a moment. This isn't an elective situation. This isn't a situation where I decide, hey, this might be a good thing to do. How about my family lives with your family for a while and we just sort of make this work for a bit. This is not that kind of situation, nor is it a situation where Culturally, we feel like multi-generational living is just sort of what we do in our family and has always been. It's not that either. This is caused by some kind of hardship, economic or natural disaster. So the remaining folks in our district that experience homelessness are split among motels and shelters, with under 1% being unsheltered. All right. Now we'll review quickly the source of homelessness. The slide you're looking at now is a wheel that sort of covers how it is that people become homeless, the triggers for homelessness. It's provided by Hope House, which is a shelter program in Milwaukee. But the wheel clearly conveys the multiple forces that contribute to homelessness. And it might challenge people's preconceived notions about why families become homeless. Clearly, as you can see, loss of job is the largest cause, with bills being higher than earnings and evictions by family members being next. Oftentimes, people focus on the left side of the wheel for why people are homeless. For example, in 2007, Fannie Mae and Gallup did a survey that revealed that 85% of Americans believe that substance abuse is a major reason for homelessness. But as you can see from this wheel, that is generally not the case. And based on my review of our local McKinney-Vento eligibility, it's my belief that our local wheel would align with the above primary causes for homelessness. Okay. All right. Now we're going to look for a moment at our trends in the identification of homeless students over the past 7 years. Generally speaking, the number have been about 300 students per year since about 2011 and 12. This year, we anticipate the end of the year number will be approximately 335, which is a fairly significant increase since last year. So this slide that you're looking at now is just sort of shows you it represented going back to 2007. You can see back then we only had about 75 homeless students, and here we are 8 years later, and we're looking at about 335. It's a fairly gradual increase, with the most precipitous jumps occurring in 2008, 2009. Though I would say that the one that we have currently is certainly worth our attention. So you can see the 5-year trend data also shows that from 2010 to 11 to our current year, we've gone from 269 to 335 students. Last year, we saw a minor regression in the number of students, but this year, you can see we've increased. Okay. Now, for just a moment, we're going to talk about another subpopulation in McKinney-Vento, and that is our unaccompanied youth. Okay. So, by definition, young people who are not in the physical custody of a parent, and it's not by their choice, are considered to be unaccompanied youth. If they have a permanent arrangement a permanent living arrangement, they're not considered McKinney-Vento. But if they've just been kicked out of their house, or if they're running from abuse or something of that nature, or if they no longer can stay with their family in their home, and they're allowed to stay on somebody's couch for a few weeks until we can figure out where you're going to go next, or something of that nature, or they're living in a shelter independent of their family, they're considered to be unaccompanied youth. So often these students are couch surfing, which is a term that we use a lot in the work that I do, and they just don't have a regular place to be. And they may be living in a temporary situation with a relative who has not indicated that they can be a real, stable, long-term solution for the young person. All right, so now we'll go over quickly the key provisions for the McKinney-Vento Act. The key provisions are that students are allowed to have immediate enrollment without documents and allowed to attend and fully participate in their school. They get what's called school stability, which is the right to stay in the school of origin for the duration of their homelessness and to the end of the year or until they're permanently housed. So I may later say the word placed in lieu of permanently housed. Placed means that they're settled now, okay? So school of origin means where was I attending school at the time of the eviction or the foreclosure or when I was expelled from my home. We know that that's important because that's where the student's intact support network is, right? Teachers that care about the kids, principals that are connected, counselors that know them. That's why we want school stability as much as possible. So one of the other key provisions is transportation to the school of origin. Also eliminating barriers to enrollment and retention in school. And also, we do some partnering. We're prepared to do some partnering with our friends at the Cabarrus Health Alliance. For most students, if there's a problem with immunization records, those students might be suspended if their immunization records are not in at a certain time. Before a student can be suspended, with McKinney-Vento students, you don't really suspend them for the immunization issue. We work very closely with the families, and if need be, with Cabarrus Health Alliance to make sure we get the records of their immunizations, and if not, we assist them in getting the actual immunizations themselves. Okay. And I just want to take a moment and tell you a little bit about the sub-grant. You may remember, those of you who were here last year may remember us telling you that we thought we were going to receive the sub-grant. We did receive the sub-grant, which we're currently using for an on-site tutorial program. It's a tutoring program that we have at My Father's House, which is a local shelter. We deliver tutoring services to the students and families that are there. We deliver we've just started delivering social emotional support by having a school counselor present if students need that. We also have early childhood services at that same shelter setting so that families with younger children will be prepared to send their kids to school ready when it's time to go to kindergarten. And also, we've also just launched a financial literacy program for older youth. We piloted that this spring based on the Dave Ramsey financial curriculum to try to put our older youth in a position to hopefully not continue this cycle that they may have grown up in, where they're in a position to be more financially stable and more successful. I just want to say a couple other things real quickly. This year, my records show that our transportation department has developed 442 routes for McKinney-Vento students, with 42% of those being in boundary. So a good number of our transportation routes are in boundary. And we know that about 58% of those, per my records, are out of boundary. Of those being served out of boundary, about 17% were living in other school districts. So we had an awful lot who were living, so just for example, perhaps you were at Patriots Elementary and that you were, then you ended up living in a shelter in Boger's boundary. That would be the kind of example where I'm saying that they're out of boundary but still in district. They're still within our count. Okay? I also want to take a quick minute to just say something about the partnerships that we've developed. I feel like we've got really strong partnerships with our community partners at Cooperative Christian Ministries. We do a lot of good work with those programs. We try to work hand in hand about making sure our students' needs are met. Internally, though, I think we have some outstanding partnerships. For example, it takes a lot of folks working together for our students to be successful. We work closely with child nutrition to make sure our students eat. We work closely with our transportation department, as you can imagine, who I can't say enough good things about how they respond to the needs. Our social work staff is outstanding. Our counselors are great. They do a great job of identifying these young people and trying to get them help. And our data managers and enrollment folks at the schools, at the front office, sometimes they're the ones who figure this out. Sometimes when a student comes in to withdraw, they're the ones who get it right away. Or a family doesn't have the adequate documentation. They go, I wonder if this is a case where the student might be homeless and they're just not disclosing that this time. So we really have a lot of really good internal partnerships that work towards ensuring that our kids are as successful as they can be. Okay. So I wonder, so that's all I was prepared to say tonight. I wonder if you all have any questions.
All right, board members, are there any questions for Mr. Basiles?
I just have one comment. I think that in the transportation area that we have purchased a fleet of vans, and is that primarily used for McKinney-Vento that are outside the district and et cetera?
So it is primarily, so the McKinney-Vento vans are used primarily for students who are out of the district or in a or out of the boundary of their school at a greater distance. So again, my example, hypothetical example of Patriots to Boger, we've got a pretty big county. I mean, geographically speaking, that's a lot of road to cover, right? And so it's more cost effective for a van to cover that ground than for a bus, school bus, a yellow school bus to go across county and do that. So it's a qualified yes. We do definitely use them for out of county transportation. In fact, I believe I'm accurate in saying that 100% of our out of county transportation is done by vans. But we also have some vans running some in county routes where it's a pretty hefty commute.
Mr. Walter?
As Mr. Powell was saying, that's quite a savings to our district by being able to use those vans instead of the school buses that we were using before.
Right. That's what we've talked about in the past. That there are some significant cost savings I mean, if you think about it, just think about fuel and wear and tear alone, and maintenance schedules alone, right? Let alone the time. It's just a faster route if you're on a van than a bus.
What's the furthest distance we go to pick somebody up?
That's a great question. I wonder if I could defer that question to Jeanette Clay. Jeanette is an outstanding partner she's in the transportation department.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
That's all right. She's been great to work with on these kind of matters, and I think she's in a better position to be able to answer that.
Good evening. What was the question?
What was the furthest distance that we go to pick somebody up?
We have planned a route to close to Kings Mountain. We never actually went, but we did plan a route. We've been to Huntersville. We go to Albemarle. We go, I'd probably say Pineville or Huntersville is probably the furthest at this point.
That's quite a long route. And then my other comment was I was able to volunteer at my father's house last week, so it was kind of a neat experience. But there's also communities and schools also partners with us as well, provides food and some stuff for folks outside the school, like during the weekends or during the summertime. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. I don't work a lot directly with communities and schools feeding program. I generally don't do a lot of work with that, but I have heard that they do some kind of outreach.
I think they partner with CCM as well.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
I think they partner with CCM.
Oh, I'll bet you they do. Yeah, CCM is a really they're a really adept partner. They're really good at building partnerships where they can best serve serve the community.
Well, I appreciate your work and everyone here to focus on these students to help them in difficult times. I think that really does make a difference. I think.
Thank you. Thank
Very
you, Mr.
proud
Walter.
of you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Harrison?
As I've said too many times, but really not enough times, I know and I hope this whole room knows that you are doing God's work, and I'm deeply grateful for what you're doing for the extremely needy circumstances of this population. My question is, you've got several years of seeing what your resource needs are, your number of students that need to be gathered up and brought back to their home school. How are you working with finance in order to plan out the projections and the needs that you have and the resources? Can you give me any kind of insight about the budgeting process that you go through when you can see the trends are going up and up,
right,
and how you're able to plan for your needs? And my other question is, are your current all of our resources are always stretched, I know that, but are you currently able to manage the population, to pick them up and get them back where they belong, and just give me a big picture of your planning, your budgeting, and your resource needs?
Okay. So for starters, I'll say, and I'll own fully, that the increase that we saw this year is not one that I saw coming. I felt as though we have kind of defied the national trend, and we've not seen a large increase in the last 2 or 3 years. In fact, last year we had that dip, and some of the statistics were saying that I was reading were saying that homelessness is down, poverty is up. It's a sort of mixed news kind of thing. So I certainly did not anticipate that I'd be reporting an increase to you this time of year. Or if we were to be reporting an increase, if I was to guess a year ago, I would have guessed a modest fluctuation, not really a real increase. So this is getting around to the fact that I haven't worked with finance about resource issues to this point because I didn't really anticipate the need for much more. At this time last year, the board had just sort of recently rolled out the vans, and that was revolutionary. You know, it was a new way to respond to student needs. It was a major capital investment, and so it was new. I would say at this point, in terms of resources, it depends on how you look at it. Certainly, you know, I think we'd be well served to have more vans. More vans requires more drivers, of course, too. So it's one of those things where the costs would increase certainly a great deal. It's not the kind of decision I'd feel comfortable speculating on, though, without first kind of meeting with a team of folks and kind of figuring out where we are. We're going to have a program improvement meeting this summer to talk about a lot of the successes we've had this year in the transportation area, for example. Obviously, transportation is going to be the greatest cost that we have, right? So we're going to talk about a lot of our successes as well as our areas to grow, and we'll even explore some of our resource issues. So certainly I'd be much more able to answer that to you in the later part of July. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Harrison.
Ms. Carpenter?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for doing such a wonderful job. And out of the 335
Yes,
that you
ma'am.
have, what would you say is about the average age that you see in that 335?
So the ages vary. It's pretty comprehensive, and here's what I can tell you, and I'll just do a quick rundown. We have kids at every level, from preschool, from pre-K through high school. So we have, for example, we have 31 high school seniors. We have 26 kindergarten students. We have 26 graders, and we have 26 third graders and 24 ninth graders. You see, it's sort of we're kind of all over the map. I think if we said the age, the average age is probably the average age of most kids in Cabarrus County schools.
But you said you had, and that was going to be one of my questions. Seniors, you said you had how many?
We have 31 seniors.
31,
right?
and because that was going to be my question,
Yeah.
how many we saw graduating. And again, I think you do an outstanding job. And you had mentioned that within your program, you did have a service for literacy for the older youth.
Yeah.
Do you offer any kind of service for the parents for literacy?
You're talking about the financial literacy?
Yeah, well, financial, but also
Right.
for reading, because you may have some of the parents. I know you said you offer it for older youth,
Right,
but do
sure.
we have anything that we're offering for the parents possibly?
The only service we have in place for the parents currently is for those with young children. We're doing some early childhood work with them, but that is more about how to prepare your child to succeed, reading with your child, tips like that. Not necessarily on the adult learner. It's certainly something we can explore.
Because, you may have some of the parents that maybe do not know how to read possibly, and that's why I was wondering if we did offer anything for the parents
Right.
Along that line, because it's really surprising sometimes when you find out that you have a parent that has gotten through life and they can't read. So I was wondering if we did offer something for them, because it's really fascinating when you find out that the homeless situation that we do have as many as we do in this county. Years ago, back in the early 90s, there was a task force that we put together. We really did, we had no numbers at all. And when we did the survey and found out at that time, the young, most of our homeless were under the age of 5, and it was just amazing how many we had.
Right.
And we started counting them at that point. But again, I want to thank you for the excellent job you have done, and thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter. Appreciate that.
Any other comments, board members? I have a couple. In reference to Ms. Carpenter's questions about the adult homeless, the Literacy Council, I don't know if you've had connection with them, but that's their mission, is to deal with that. So perhaps that would be another partner you could
Sure.
investigate. Last year, at the beginning of this school year, we started off around 183 or 84 in one of our reports that we got. So when you see the numbers ramp up, when do you really start seeing the increase? Because, that's almost double
Yeah.
where we started off the year at. And it seems
Right.
like we started off really low, and I guess that
Yeah.
dovetails into you weren't consuming as much money as you needed or had to consume in the beginning of the year, but then you probably went past your budget at the end. So,
Well, I think probably the best way to answer that is that typically our largest months that we see newly identified homeless students tend to be September, October, August, September, October. So the first quarter tends to be historically a very heavy time for identification of new McKinney-Vento eligible students. This year, it was to my surprise, at least, that we usually in the time where we start to see maybe an ebb in the number of students, it didn't really happen that way. Our March numbers were higher than usual. Our April numbers were unexpectedly high. Our May numbers were unexpectedly high. So it was just a surprise to us in that regard. So I would say that typically in the past we've been in a pretty good place of knowing where we stood by the end of the first quarter, and certainly you expect there to be some movement, some transient right after the holidays as well. We just seem to have a lot of it this year throughout. So the budget impact, the budget implications for that, obviously more students, more travel is going to mean more money spent on transporting students, certainly.
well, I want to, again, I appreciate what you've done, and I know how fast you're able to get the students connected and with the transportation, which means a huge amount to adults who are trying to struggle with their kids and trying to get a family under some type of roof and settled so that they can continue to work. And you guys have been able to connect the dots really quick, and I really appreciate all the efforts that all of you do in this area.
Well, thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. And we recognize that there's areas to improve, right? I mean, I say to Jeanette a lot, and I say it a little bit obnoxiously, that I want our routes developed the day before we know we need them, which is, of course, impossible, But these things take time in some instances, and there are resource constraints at times. So we do the best we can, and that's why we're going to have this meeting over the summer with principals and the bus supervisors from some of our our schools that are high users of our services, so that we can figure out how best to meet our student needs and reduce that time to as little as it could possibly be.
Yeah, I think you have job security, unfortunately.
Regrettably, yes.
Your numbers are going up. The numbers for free and reduced lunch went up again, another 2% this year. So, the trend is up, up, and I don't see an end in sight for this county.
Well, and you may
getting more
remember
and more.
last year I reported that there was a strong correlation between the number of free and reduced lunch and the McKinney-Vento population, which is not surprising, I suppose, but it does validate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, board members, we're going to 4.01, which is the consent agenda. Let me just orient you as to why we have a consent agenda. We were hoping in the process to try to speed up our meetings, so the consent agenda are basically items that we routinely go through each month, and it shouldn't be a tremendous amount of discussion, and normally we would say that most of these items would go into consent. I'll go through each one at a time so that you will have a chance to look at them. If there are any comments, let us know. If not, we'll move on rather briskly. So I'll open it up for 4.01, which is the continuing budget resolutions. Any comments or questions on that one? Okay, let's go to 4.02, and that is the CCS maintenance contract. Ms. Klutz, Has the details if you need it, but in this one, we just removed a paragraph and changed it back to the way it was originally written. Comments? Okay. We'll go to 4.03. These are policies for approval on the first reading. All of these were PLS updates. Well, this one specifically was a PLS update, so there was not any substantive change to this policy, and so that's all we're really looking at is just the main.
I'd like that one off consent because of the fact that it has a dollar figure that we're giving. It says $500,000. Just, I support it. I just want to make sure that it's out there and gives the public more time to review that document.
Was that a change in the document? Or
it is not a change in the document.
Then why don't we, if we need to do that, why wouldn't we put that back to the policy committee if we want to discuss that?
I just think if we're going to vote on something, I'd like to see it on action.
Okay, we'll put it on action. So move the 4.03 to action agenda.
Now,
Yes, ma'am.
Rob, what was your problem on that one?
Carol, I don't have a problem with the document, but it's talking about a dollar figure.
The amount of, was that, the state was recommending, I can't remember, was that?
We didn't change the dollar figure, but it's there. This is,
Was that something the state required, Mark, or was that?
There are too many lit up, so I can't.
oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. The change on the newspapers, there are a couple of changes you see in red that were recommended from the model policy in terms of what formal bidding would be required. I think the $500,000 that Mr. Walter's talking about that's the threshold to do formal bidding. So we are specifically talking about electronic advertisement. That's the point that we did not previously. We just said you had to advertise for formal bids. We're now specifying we can use newspapers, which is a traditional approach. More and more companies are now looking for electronic advertisements where you're posting them electronically, and so this specifically gives you the authority to do an electronic advertisement because a lot of contractors are checking newspapers less frequently. The other thing that we did modify to make consistent under F, the change order provision, and you'll see this in the next policy when we get off the consent agenda. We had a potential inconsistency in authority for change orders. We had one policy that says that the superintendent could approve contracts or change orders up to $250,000, yet this policy said that change order authority was $25,000. So you had $25,000 and you had $250,000. The policy committee, in looking at, decided that for change orders, the logical figure was probably the same as for formal bidding, which is $90,000. So this change makes that amount consistent with the informal bidding requirement at $90,000.
And I think that's what I get at. We're just making sure that we're all comfortable, and this is a number that we're all okay with.
All right, board members, I've got that on the action agenda for next week. All right,
let me ask a question.
Wait a minute. Go ahead.
Excuse me. If we got 6 that's satisfied and 1 that's not, well, why do we need to send it back for?
We're not sending it back. We're just putting it on a vote agenda for next week to vote on. Rather than having it on the consent agenda, it would just be on for the action agenda. That's all we're doing. Yeah. All right, let's go to 4.04, which is the policies for approval on the second reading.
And the same for 91.15.
All right, hold on. I'm trying to get my machine to work.
Yeah, that was the one that this isn't the process that we currently follow, so it's really not a necessary policy.
So that one you want pulled out and put on the action agenda.
It's my understanding that this was a recommendation from the State School Board Association. Mark?
Yes, 9115 is a recommended policy. Mr. Walter's right, we're not currently pre-qualifying bidders. It was the Policies Committee view that it was a good idea to have this as an option since it's now allowed under statute. So it would be my suggestion that you have it, even though we're not currently doing it. I think it gives you flexibility in the
It
future.
just, allows you to move forward in the future, but we'll put this on action agenda, and we'll talk about 9115 as an action item. 3320 and 9020 will all be on the consent agenda. Okay? Let's go to 4.05. We now have the school nutrition program bids. When we were presented these in the agenda review meeting, we thought that these were pretty straightforward, so if there are any questions, Dr. Probst is available. Board members, do you have any comments or questions for Dr. Probst about the school nutrition program bids?
I'll make one comment. I'm fine with keeping it on the consent agenda, but our two bidders for the big contract, Cisco and U.S. Foods, I believe, are under negotiations to merge, which means that when this comes up next year, we may only have one bidder.
Actually, we might have a second, and that is a new company is coming into the area, Gordon Foods, and they do the same type of work and provide similar products. So we will have a bidding situation, it looks like.
Thank you for feeding our children.
All right, board members, seeing no change to that, we'll keep that on the consent agenda. And now we'll go to 4.06, which is the BOE-BOC agency agreement.
Could we
Any
put that
attached-
on action, please?
Yes, ma'am, we can put that on the action agenda. Any concerns specifically about that one, Ms. Carpenter?
Well, I just wanted to wait to see how things shook out. I'd just rather see that on the consent, please.
Okay.
I mean, on
Action agenda, I've got it, okay. So 4.06 is on the action agenda, and that will be the entire one. All right, now we're going to the items for consideration at our June business meeting. First, we'll begin with 5.01, which is the budget amendments. Ms. Klutz, could you come and present to us, please?
I kind of like the consent agenda. Getting used to that.
Hopefully, we're moving some of the discussion out of the way.
Sounds good, thank you. So I have a couple of budget amendments for you. The first one is our state budget amendment, and there's a couple of additional funds, the normal reimbursement for substitutes that we get from the state. In addition, we received the stop arm camera, and there was a special allocation for an engine allotment to transportation. Those things, equipment's not a normal thing that comes in the transportation allotment, but we make those special requests, and they make those allocations separately. Then the bottom one is just a reclassification of early college, high school grant funds, just kind of utilizing any remaining funds that we had and putting those in the proper place at the end of the school year. Okay. So we'll go to federal unless you have questions. For federal, we're just agreeing the state books with the local books, and so occasionally there's a change between the planning allotment and the actual allotment, and these funds all carry over, so there's no concern of losing these funds. So you'll see that there's a couple additional allotments there. There's a couple of reclasses there, moved from one area to the other. I'll call note to the third one listed, our school nutrition program received a grant for Wolf Meadow and Royal Oaks for some equipment, so we greatly appreciate those funds. It comes in the form of a federal grant. And then you'll see just a couple of reclasses and additional funds for federal. Questions on federal? We'll go on to capital. And you're familiar with the request you made to the county for $950,500 to start the Royal Oaks replacement school. And so there's the allocation. You requested it, the county funded it, approved and funded it, so those being recorded on our books now. Okay. And the final one, we have a $1,000 grant received from ExxonMobil for Long Preschool. In addition, we have the grant, the Career Award for Science and Math Teachers of $30,000. It's actually a $175,000 grant over 5 years with $30,000 allocated every year, and then the final year there's a $25,000 award that goes to the teacher for completing the program.
Who oversees that program?
Oversees the financial aspect. I
You,
will.
but the application of it, who,
The application of
teachers
it,
and,
probably the science and math. The borough's welcome. Sorry,
okay.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
All right, board members, if there are no questions, then we'll move on to 5.02. Oh.
Go to consent.
Yeah, oh yeah, y'all want this on consent agenda? I'm sorry. I even got tripped up a little bit. Okay, we have a memorandum of understanding between Cabarrus County Emergency Medical Systems and Cabarrus County Board of Education for the Concord High School Public Safety Academy. Ms. Conger,
Good
welcome.
evening. I am so glad to be here with another memorandum of understanding. We just keep Mr. Henriquez busy with affiliation agreements and memorandums this spring. This time I have a memorandum of understanding between the county EMS and our EMT program. This is a relatively new program that we started. It's part of our public safety recruit classes. And next year, we're going to have 31 students in our EMT1 class and 20 in our EMT T2. That's really something because we just started out with public safety courses. And so these students will be learning quite a few skills. And last time you asked me some skills, so this time I have them for you. They are going to learn to take blood pressure, count pulse rates and respiration rates, apply splints, dress wounds or injuries. They can do patient assessments. But when they begin to do ride-alongs, mostly they're just going to watch the paramedics for the ride-alongs. So what this memorandum of understanding is used for is so that we can do ride-alongs with the EMS and our kids can gain clinical experiences. So do you have any questions?
Board members, are there any questions on this memorandum of understanding? Dr. Phillips?
Well, it's not a question, it's a suggestion in the general provisions. It says, this agreement shall automatically renew unless terminated by either party within 30-day written notice. I would suggest, say, this agreement shall automatically renew on July 1st of each year, so that it's made clear that, you know, they can't.
Yeah.
We don't want to be doing this on June 1st, because then we could run into a situation where the last 2 weeks of school, we can't do what we want to do.
I think that's a good suggestion, Dr. Phillips. We can make that change.
Okay.
Well, you know, and I want to build on what he just said, in one of the previous MOUs that we did with, and I don't remember who we did it with, but we talked about June 30th, July 1st, and are there any renewal dates on this, or does this just go on ad infinitum without any renewal or any review of the language in it?
No.
I mean, as it's drafted here, it'll automatically renew unless either side gives notice that you don't want to renew it. And we've moved towards some automatic renewals just because, particularly when things are going well, it's the kind of thing that oftentimes you forget to do. And so we've had other ones where it's like, oh, wait, we're 4 months in and we haven't officially renewed. So I think administratively, an automatic renewal is often the best. That way, either party can raise their hand and say, I don't think it's working, or we need to revisit it. So I do like the idea of a specific date, though, that's tied to the school year, so we're not stuck in a situation where, you know, it's ending mid-year. So I think that's a good.
Yeah, because I think the previous one that we were talking about was with the hospital themselves.
Yes, it was.
And we had some specific language to get it to the July 1st date.
Right.
But then we had, every so often, we renewed with the hospital themselves, but since this is with Cabarrus County, it's just going to be an understood. Is that correct?
I think just with the county, because of the close working relationship, I'm not sure, I mean, we could do it either way, but I don't know if we need as much the formal kind of review and renewal structure. But it's fairly new. I mean, so there may be, it certainly can be revised as we go in and make those changes. That's something that.
Right, and the
parties can
partner
do.
that works with us, Lieutenant Bill Jameson, he also sits on our advisory committee, and so they meet monthly. In a couple of years, that'll move to quarterly, but they'll have these discussions as they go, so I know that any changes will be timely.
Okay. I have one other question, and that was about, it says the Cabarrus County shall provide clinical opportunities during the hours of 8 o'clock or 0800 to 2200 hours, 7 days weekly. Are we actually going to have children or students participating 7 days a week
We may have some
between those
students
hours?
who participate in the evening, just because they can't participate during the day, or some students that participate during the weekend because that's the time that the group they're going to ride along with will be running
Okay.
an ambulance.
I just wanted to be
Yes, so we
clarified as to
will.
what
We'll have
that
kids
meant.
that run
because
different times.
That was quite a, yes, sir.
And give me some kind of mental picture about how this is being distributed or set up in different locations, or what sites is this being offered at? How is this program located?
Okay, the program is located at Concord High School.
Okay.
And it's a part of what started out as the
Fire Academy.
Right.
Great.
And so now it's a public safety academy, and it's a different academy. We've talked about the structure and what an academy looks like. So this one looks more like a recruit academy. So they're not actually integrating coursework with math classes, science classes. It's all strictly hands-on and skilled work. But it's located there. They have an EMS paramedic who teaches the course. But it's unique to what we do and what other districts do because we have someone in-house. We don't have the community college coming out and teaching this course for us. So we can articulate those courses. Right now, any student in the district who can get transportation can come to the school and take that course. And we do have kids from other schools that drive over and participate.
And who's in charge of the Facebook page? Because they were just posting all the time, and they're plainly busy and active and engaged in what they're
That
doing.
would be Chief Barlow, who
Okay.
is the lead for the Fire Academy, and he is retiring this year.
No!
Yes, he is. And we
It ain't fair.
No, it's not. But
Well,
he's been around for a
You'll
long
have to take
time.
those duties as well, I suppose.
That's right.
No, again, they are obviously engaged in what
They
they
are.
do, and they have great leadership, and thank you for your work with them as well.
Thank you. Well, they do it all.
I just had a couple related costs. Somewhere in there it talked about a requirement for uniforms. Is there a fee for this program that covers the uniform costs, or who pays?
We don't charge any fees per se. The money is raised, and if there's a student who has a need, we will purchase their uniforms for them. But I know that Concord High has done that in-house.
Okay, and
Or they've raised funds, but no child has been asked to pay.
Okay, so no child, and then related to that was the professional liability insurance for students. How
We
is that
carry
handled?
professional liability insurance on our nurse aid students, construction trade students who are out in the field, these EMT students. It's a $3 million
So it's
kind
a
of
blanket
umbrella
coverage,
policy.
whoever's enrolled in the class.
Excuse me?
It's kind of like a blanket coverage, anyone who's enrolled in the
Yes,
class?
anyone who's in the class or goes out and does an internship or any work-based activity.
Okay, and then that was my third question. It said student responsibilities, it says develop familiarity with internship guidelines, but we call this a clinical. Shouldn't it
Right.
be clinical guidelines?
We call it internship, and if you're in the medical healthcare world, you call it a clinical.
Yeah, well, the entire agreement talks about clinical.
Right, and it is
we've got
a
this one
clinical
internship
experience.
guidelines stuck in here.
Right, that's probably came from our two entities working together. One person says internship and the other says
Maybe
clinical.
just to clarify that in this agreement.
Okay. All right.
That's all I had.
All right. If she makes that clarification, is there already put that on the consent agenda? Okay. Then we will put that on consent. All right, we have Mrs. Conger again for the Career and Technical Education Local Plan.
That's right, it's an evening of career and technical education. Let's see, Dr. Probst, are you going to be driving the PowerPoint, or am I?
Your choice, what would you like?
You can do that for me if you'd like.
Which one would you like?
Here you go. If I run too many things at one time, we'll be here for a couple of hours. I'd like to present to you the application for career and technical education state and federal funding for the 15-16 year. This plan will require board approval and board chair and superintendent signatures, and it can be submitted no later than June 30th. The purpose of this plan is threefold. It's for performance management, strategic planning, and accountability. If you look at the chart, these are numbers from this year in participation. We had over 7,000 middle school students and 9,000 high school students that participated in coursework ranging from entry-level career development to industry-certified courses. The next slide shows you our 2015-16 projected resources. We've increased our months of employment, which means that we can hire more teachers. We have an increase of state program support of almost 20,000, and we lost just a little bit in our federal support and improvement. Teachers, supplies, equipment, and program support funds ensure that students have access to industry standard equipment and teachers trained in current technologies and instructional practices. This past school year, CTE funds supported professional development through the Buck Institute. Our academy design teams trained in project-based learning. We also provided differentiated instruction and diversity training to meet the needs of those students who would fit into our non-traditional pathways. Among our biggest purchases over the past 2 years have been computers. And if you ask Dr. Dr. Probst, she has worked with us so well to make sure that all of these computers have been installed. And at this point, we don't have any computers that are older than about 2 years old in any CTE lab, whether it's middle school or high school, which means that we're going to be able to create some sort of turnaround system that we can move computers every year, and everyone will know exactly when they're going to get new computers. And now we can focus on equipment in other program areas. Each year, we determine our greatest opportunities to meet both student and employer needs. We use economic and workforce trend data from sources such as Central Iowa Workforce Board, Charlotte Regional Partnership, Cabarrus Economic and Harrisburg Economic Development, and the Cabarrus Visitors Bureau. The Charlotte region consists of about 2.7 million people living in 16 counties in 2 different states. 12 of those counties are in North Carolina and 4 in South Carolina. Our region is in the center of the East Coast. Location is important. When we consider target sectors for industry growth, we always have to think location, location. Think about this. According to Charlotte, USA, within 2 hours flight time, or nearly 1 day's delivery by motor freight, businesses in the Charlotte, USA region can reach almost 60% of the population of the United States. We are definitely in a hotbed of career opportunities, and we need to be prepared. In addition to over 90 different courses we offer, all in career pathways, we're also growing career academies. And I'm going to take a little bit of time tonight to share with you how we determined what career academies we were going to develop and how they function. Last fall, we opened our first career-themed academies. The Academy of Information Technology at Cox Mill High School, the Academy of Hospitality and Tourism at Hickory Ridge High School. This fall, we'll cut the ribbon at 3 new academies. The Academy of Health Science and Biotechnology at Northwest Cabarrus, the Academy of Advanced Manufacturing and Automation at J.M. Robinson, and the Academy of Energy and Sustainability at Mount Pleasant High School. And all of the logos that you just saw on that slide were created by students, and we're pretty proud of those kids. When we considered themes for each high school, we considered 3 things. 1, what are the fastest growing industry sectors in our region? 2, the community each academy will serve, and the physical location of each school. Each academy theme is either directly aligned to a target, or the academy theme runs throughout multiple target industries. How does an academy look different from a traditional career pathway? A traditional career pathway is made up of 4 career and technical education courses, and one of those has to be a second level course. There are a variety of courses to choose from within any given cluster. Our academies were designed using the National Academy Foundation model. And if you look at the picture of the model in the Venn diagram, you can see that it's based on academy structure, curriculum and instruction, advisory boards, and work-based learning. Every time I go out to work with parents, I get a question. How will my child's experience differ as an academy student versus a regular high school student? Academies are schools within a school. Students are involved in work-based experiences that tie directly to the academy theme. The students are cohorted into core and career and tech ed courses where they will participate in integrated coursework. Students are supported not only by their teachers and other academy staff, but also by industry partners. At the end of the student's academy experience, they will receive what's called NAF Track certification. Last summer at the National NAF Academy Conference, partners, AT&T, Juniper Network, Cisco, EMC, Verizon, HP, Xerox, and JP Morgan decided that they would make a pact with NAF and say, look, if you can get kids to us that are filling up the skills gap, they're making things happen at their schools, they're working through work-based learning, they understand how core ties to all of their career and tech ed courses, then we'll do some things for those kids that other kids don't get. So they made sure that those students who finished the NAF track will receive pre-interview and resume support, guaranteed interviews, and none of us ever got a guaranteed interview when we graduated. They'll get applicant feedback and coaching post-interview, and then college internship opportunities. This is really big for our students that complete these programs. The first academy is the Academy of Information Technology. Forbes named Raleigh and Charlotte to the 20 most wired cities list. More than 100,000 workers are employed in more than 3,000 IT firms in North Carolina. For this reason, we selected IT as one of our first career-themed academies. Students will participate in SAS programming, Java, C#, and Adobe Academy coursework. This year, 60 students were enrolled in the first cohort, and currently 54 students have enrolled for next year. And at the bottom of each slide, you'll see who our advisory members are, and we're continually adding to that list on each slide. Cabarrus County boasts one of the most visited attractions in North Carolina. I don't know if any of you know what that is, but if you have someone in your house that shops, it's Concord Mills. Cabarrus County is poising itself to become a destination location. We have racing, shopping, restaurants, family-themed resorts, and friendly towns that beckon to be visited. Our students will be prepared to fill the need for those skilled in hospitality and tourism. This academy started with 37 students last year and increased to 39 for next year. New technologies now allow us to produce more with far fewer people. Today, one factory worker can accomplish what required 3 workers a generation earlier. Largely due to these technological advances, manufacturing productivity increased more than 120% over the past 15 years. Students in the Academy of Advanced Manufacturing and Automation will participate in pre-engineering coursework that will lead to certifications such as the Certified Process Technician. And if you know anything about that particular certification, it's usually not offered on a high school level. It's offered after you graduate. We have worked with S&D Coffee and a few other manufacturers, and they said if we can get kids certified in the 10th grade, they'll be more willing to provide internship experiences in between the junior and senior year so that they'll have hands-on, and when they go out on the floor, they'll understand what the engineers are talking about. There are more than 200 companies directly tied to the energy sector, employing over 20,000 people just in our region. For this reason, we chose Energy and Sustainability as our 5th career-themed academy. There are 33 students currently enrolled, and they have just a dynamite industry partner group. If you look at that, these folks came to their first meeting, and within 30 minutes were emailing each other talking about what they want to do to make this academy better. So this particular academy definitely fits the theme of the area that the school is in. Health Science and Biotechnology were selected as the career theme for Northwest Cabarrus High School, with over 40,000 degrees awarded in science, engineering, and technology disciplines in North and South Carolina, and more than 10,000 workers employed in the region's health and life sciences. This is why we chose this particular theme. Also, if you look at location, we know that the North Carolina Research Center is about 5 miles down the road from the school. So we're definitely looking forward to having them as partners, and we do have 2 researchers who sit on our advisory council. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't brag on the public safety recruit class, and that's the group that I just talked to you about, so I'm not going to go through the full slide. I will tell you, though, that this group started out with 15 students, and that was it. We didn't have a teacher. The Concord Fire and Life said, we'll come out and teach the classes if you'll just help us out. We don't have anybody that we can pull in as recruits from Cabarrus County. So after 5 years, we've got 240 students in that particular group, taking public safety, EMT, firefighting, and now criminal justice. And our recruits are being recruited by some of the best fire departments in the state. So this has been a really true success. The industry support for this academy comes from Concord Fire and Life, Cabarrus EMS, Cabarrus County Firemen's Association, and the Office of the State Fire Marshal. The next slide, if you look at it, these are industry partners who also provide support and guidance in both our construction and automotive trades courses. Both of these labs, in particular NCCER and NATEF, have to be certified. So these folks come in and do walkthroughs, they provide support, and they let us know where we need to work to make our programs better. Now, we know that career development begins long before high school. Last March, over 900 middle school students participated in the 2015 Students at Work initiative. Students participated in tours and career days over the course of 1 week. We had tremendous support from our local businesses and industries, and if you look at that list, there's some pretty cool places that those kids got to visit. In the 2015-16 school year, one of our big initiatives is to take that support that we have and make sure that we have vertical alignment between what the high schools are doing and the middle schools are doing in career development, both in curriculum and in the equipment that they use. I provided a list of credentials that we offer, and we continue to add credentials. I think the first time I ever showed you this slide, we had 3. So we're adding more and more each year. The number of credentials earned, and that's the next slide. There's a chart, but I want to give you the numbers there. In 2011, we started out with 472. That was the first year that we collected data. 11-12, we grew to 1,817. 12-13, 1,938, and 13-14, we were almost at 3,000. We don't have our numbers yet for this year, but I know we have blown that number out of the water because we've added quite a few more certifications. Okay. Credentials are just one measure of student success in career and tech ed. The other indicators are listed, and those are reading, language arts, math, technical skill attainment, which would be all the CTE courses, they're all tested. Secondary school completion, student graduation rates, secondary placement, non-traditional placement, and completion. We compare ourselves to North Carolina, the Southwest region, and DPI established CTE affinity groups. And if you look at the next map, you'll see the Southwest region, and it is marked in pink. And then our affinity groups are listed, and we don't have the same affinity groups that you usually hear when you hear presentations from any of us upstairs. These affinity groups are based solely on size. So we are the 10th largest out of all the largest, so we're competing against Wake County, Charlotte, Mecklenburg. We're with the big guys who have a lot of programs, and we hold our end of it and do pretty well. The next chart shows some of our data, and I provided in your executive summary more in-depth data, but for tonight, I just wanted to give you a brief overview. We're above the state in 5 of 8 of the indicators, above the Southwest region in 7 of 8 indicators, and above our affinity group in 6 of the 8 indicators. Okay. Career and technical education in Cabarrus County is all about preparing students to leave us ready for career in college. I think we're well on our way to making this an attainable goal for all of our students. Thank you. May I answer any questions?
All right, board members, any questions?
I'll just make a comment.
Farr.
I've got no questions. I know Ms. Carpenter and I were on the board, I guess, when you implemented the fire training, and I thought that was, we visited, and it was amazing. And I'm just, it just tickles me that we have, just keep adding and adding and adding and giving all of our students a chance to succeed in life. And I said a long time ago, we talk about academics all the time, and I think we provide a kid that's going to college, we provide them all kinds of resources to get there. But now we've got actually something that takes care of every kid in the system, and that's something to be proud of. Thank you.
Mr. Harrison?
Ms. Conger, will you let me sign up for some of these certifications, please?
I get that question all the time, too.
And your answer to a person over a certain age is
We would
no,
love to
probably.
have you, but...
No, but I really do believe that more students in the Cabarrus County system should be salivating to get into these programs and to earn, they won't get, but to earn these skills, because it'll put them on the right path. They'll be able to manage a variety of things and go for that academic stuff if they choose to. And it's some great, great stuff. I'll often look through these lists of certifications. I'm a technical writer, and the stuff that's here is extremely valid and extremely valuable to know, to work in so many environments and to be productive and to be what employers want and need and demand. And you seem, and I know, you're doing the work to crank that kind of talent out of our schools. for the benefit of those children. Thank you.
Mr. Walter?
Just a couple questions. I think you didn't mention, or I was looking at this link that you provided, and it shows that actually we're pretty good at gender equality here. We have pretty close to male-female mix.
We are. The highest that you'd want to get there is in the 50s, otherwise it goes over 50, and then you've got so many females in a male-dominated course or vice versa that it's no longer non-traditional. But we have really, really worked on that, and I was telling Dr. Van Hukelum that we're so lucky we were part of a grant that the EDC worked on out of Cabarrus County called a Creative Give Back Grant. And that grant is timely to us because we're going to be able to do surveys and collect data on perceptions of parents and people in the schools about how do you feel about females in certain jobs, and then be able to take that and market better to our female students.
The other question I had related to the application, it shows these numbers dropping off significantly last year, and then the numbers you show jump right back up again.
Well, are you looking at enrollment numbers?
Yeah, I think that's what it
Enrollment
is.
numbers are incorrect, and we know that from the state, so what we did was we dropped back and used our local data for the board presentation. The company that helps us do all of our testing and collecting our data went out of business rather quickly, about a month ago. And so our data, we have worked really hard to make sure that we've pulled local data so that you'll have something that's accurate.
So there are students on this academically disadvantaged category?
Probably not if it's in one of the enrollment listings.
Yeah, it dropped off for last year. And then my last question, is ROTC, is that considered part of the CT program?
No, it's not. But I do tell people this. We know that students who have a focus, whether it be career and technical education, JROTC, music, arts, if they have something that they take a continuum of courses throughout high school, they will graduate. And I think that's why we're seeing such high percentages in our graduation rates.
Thank you for the work.
One question, Mr. Basilis was in here earlier talking about McKinney-Vento. Do you know of any of your students in CTE that are actually McKinney-Vento students, and have we been able to find a way to integrate them into, because a CTE does require a little extra outside of the classroom activity, I would think, so.
Well, unless they're traveling, almost anything they do can be done within the classroom, and if it involves a student organization, we'll find funds. So that's part of the funding that we receive if we have students who can't afford something, and we know that they are considered economically disadvantaged, we provide funding for anything that they can't afford. So I'm not sure about numbers, though, but okay. I could find out.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you. All right, board members, is this going to, Ms. Carpenter, you weren't waving to me, so I didn't think you were interested.
Thank you, and I am so excited about adding these other academies on. They have been wonderful, and I'm like David. I want to participate also. I brag all the time whenever I have the opportunity to tell people wherever I am about all our programs and these academies especially, to say, you know, when our students graduate, they can have their regular diploma plus they can have this also. So I'm just so thrilled to see these other ones come online, and it is such a great opportunity for our students. And the public safety, as Tim had mentioned earlier, that one is so outstanding. They always invite us to, when they got their new fire truck, to see them wash it, and it is, and I would like to be involved with that. Someone just mentioned recently, I'm very fortunate just to have just recently got a new granddaughter, and it was mentioned. Now you're going to have to learn CPR for a child, you know, for an infant. So I'm going to have to go learn CPR for an infant. So that is a course I'm going to have to take now. But this is just a wonderful, wonderful program, and we do have all the courses for our college students, but when they learn a trade, this is something that we've always stressed, that we want to educate the whole child, and we're giving a trade to these students, and it is wonderful. And again, I want to thank you for all that you do and all that we are doing for our students. And these academies, I think, is just another thing to educate the whole child, and I do appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
I just want to make a couple comments very quickly. This is, I'm actually this year working on Miss Klein at Hickory Ridge. I'm actually doing her evaluation, so I've been to some of the Academy board meetings, and I would just say this is probably the best example that I've seen of integrating business community with school. You know, we try to do that all the time, but as we invite people in, if you looked at those, the list of her advisory boards where we really have local employers that are serving on the board, like in that one, it's Embassy Suites, it's the Speedway, and as we start to add those, when you're talking about S&D Coffee, the Biotech, so we're actually having local employers connected to come in and work with that really is impressive whenever you see that, and the teachers have done such a great job for that. So I can't think of a better example of when we really do integrate, and as Mr. First said, you have the spectrum of every job that's available at these places, sometimes entry-level job all the way up through management jobs, so they try to expose them to all of the opportunities that are essentially right here in our community. So very impressive when you see that integration, and I think probably reminds us why Ms. Conger was the CTE, the state CTE Director of the Year, right? So really, really impressive, and I would encourage you guys to go to a board meeting and see how that becomes integrated, because it really is impressive.
I have one question, and maybe I should know this, but one of my questions, how are we going to work around, or are we going to be able to work around, say I have a child, and this child is not going to Mount Pleasant. This child is going to J. Robinson, and they are really interested in energy, and they want to be in the energy, they want to be in that program. How are we going to get around this so this child maybe can get into the energy and sustainable, academy? Are we going to be able to work with this child so they can do that?
Well, this current year, look at Dr. Goodman.
Well, I may be opening a whole can of worms.
Oh, that's okay, because it's a question everyone
these
asks.
academies are wonderful, and we may have a child that really wants to be at the Northwest Academy. How are we going to do this?
Well,
because I really want to see them to take advantage of these academies.
Well, the current year, for this year, we're only taking students from feeder schools because we wanted to get the academies off the ground. And then over the course of the next year, we'll begin to work on a plan. And so hopefully we will be able to get students, because we can take 100 students or enroll 100 students in each cohort.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
All right, board members, is this going to be a consent item to put on consent for next week? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Conger. Great news.